All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to Advanced Flight Planning with ForeFlight Dispatch. In this webinar, we're going to walk you through the essential workflows of our next generation flight planning tool, Dispatch, as well as go over some of the recent feature additions and use a number of different example flight plans to show you just how flexible and powerful this capability is. Our presenters today are not new to doing this sort of webinar. We have Caitlin Galloway and Josh Pava, and I'll let each of them introduce themselves. So go ahead, Caitlin.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Galloway, and I'm the product owner for Dispatch. So I work on all of the new features that we bring to Dispatch. I've been with ForeFlight since 2015, and I'm a private pilot.
Thanks, Caitlin. Your turn, Josh.
Hi, my name is Josh Pava, and I am in the QA department at ForeFlight. My responsibilities primarily reside around ForeFlight Dispatch, as well as our Runway Analysis, weight and balance, aircraft performance, and flight planning tools. In addition to my position here, I'm also a corporate pilot, and I fly for an individual on a Bombardier aircraft.
Great. So moving on to the agenda today, we're going to start out with a quick overview of what is Dispatch. There's a lot of different aspects to the product, and so I just want to quickly give you a highlight of those different aspects. And then we'll go from there into an overview of the flights list. And from there, Caitlin will demonstrate two example flight plans using Dispatch, increasing in complexity from a transatlantic flight from the US to the UK, and then even more complex into a flight from the UK to Dubai, showcasing not only route constraints, but also Eurocontrol validated auto routing and some of the more advanced capabilities that Dispatch supports. And from there, we'll move on to Q&A. Before we begin, just a few reminders about the GoToWebinar platform. You can ask questions via the message panel on the right. Just click that button that looks like a question mark inside of a speech bubble, and you can type in your question at the bottom. We will have staff responding to your questions during the webinar, and then we'll also pick out a few of the more instructive questions that we will answer live at the end. We strongly encourage you to submit your questions as soon as you think of them. Don't wait to see the letters Q and A pop up on the screen at the very end. That's what a lot of people do, and they often don't get their questions answered because we just don't have time to answer the huge surge of questions that comes in at the end. So if you have a question, just type it in, and at the very least, you should get an answer by message during the webinar. We also recommend that you join from a computer, not a mobile device. We tend to find that people have more audio problems when they're joining from their iPhone or their iPad. So again, just always join from a computer if you want to avoid any problems like that. And lastly, in case you do run into problems, or if you have to leave early, or if you just want to be able to watch this session again, it is being recorded and it will be accessible at foreflight.com/webinars starting tomorrow. So let's get started. What is ForeFlight Dispatch? Well, to put it in a sentence, Dispatch is a powerful component of ForeFlight Web that delivers next-generation, multi-user, schedule-to-mobile flight planning, resulting in greater efficiency and productivity for flight departments of any size. So let's break down all of what's in that sentence because there's quite a lot there. First of all, we have the team flight planning aspect. One of the great things about Dispatch is it enables really highly collaborative flight planning. So all of your flight planners, your dispatchers, your schedulers, and even your pilots can all collaborate on the same platform and can view a summary of all active flights planned and filed and completed all in one place. This is the flights view, and this is the first thing that Caitlin will cover when she gets to her portion of the webinar. We also, like I mentioned schedulers there. We do support integrations with scheduling systems. Many of the most popular scheduling systems are supported. You'll see a list of them here in just a couple minutes. But what that allows you to do is every time you schedule a new flight, that flight is automatically imported to Dispatch and becomes available with all of its basic details so that flight planners can start working on that right away. Next up, we also have a very powerful trip support integration, currently with Jeppesen ITPS, Honeywell Forge, and UAS International Trip Support. What this does is to allow authorized trip support personnel to actually access your dispatch instance just as if they were part of your account. So in addition to the scheduling integration, this is another really fantastic way to get support from third-party vendors when using dispatch. And next up here, we have the integration with ForeFlight, which is, of course, one of the most essential parts of this, of dispatch, and really the biggest thing that gives it so much power in terms of uniting your flight department and helping everyone collaborate better together. What this means is that when a flight planner is finished planning a flight, filing it, however far they want to go with it, they can then release that flight to assigned crew members. And those crew members will get an email like you can see on the left there. And that flight will then appear in their ForeFlight app so that they can brief the flight, they can review any attached documents, again, which may have been automatically generated like the briefing and the NavLog, or they may have been manually attached by flight planners or trip support personnel. Any documents like that will be available, so pilots can then review the flight, brief it, and get going with it. It's also possible to control whether or not pilots will be able to edit the flight. This is something that Caitlin will demonstrate during her walkthrough, in which the flight planner can choose to lock the flight from editing by the pilot or to make it editable so that those edits will then be transferred back and forth between the iPad and dispatch. And lastly, the central component of dispatch that doesn't relate to any of its outside integrations is just the advanced flight planning that it supports. It really goes above and beyond what ForeFlight on its own can do as in terms of the mobile app, and it adds in a lot of really advanced capabilities like ETP and ETOPS, very complex route constraints, as you'll see in that flight to Dubai, and just many other capabilities to support a wide range of different types of flight planning needs. And lastly, here's a nice little illustration of the whole ecosystem as I've been talking about it here. We have dispatch in the middle with your scheduling system on the left feeding in flight plans to dispatch, your trip support provider below there supporting your flight planners in whatever ways they need that, and then ForeFlight Mobile on the right so that those flight planners can then release the flights to the pilots in ForeFlight Mobile with all of the extensive capabilities that it provides to pilots. And in addition to these are some of the other major components of dispatch to mention. These sort of fit into the advanced flight planning component of it. You have Runway Analysis. This is something that is available both in dispatch and on ForeFlight Mobile. You have Weight and Balance. This is something fairly new that we've introduced in which you can now integrate your weight and balance planning into your flight planning. You have eAPIS. That's one of the advanced flight planning capabilities that dispatch supports. And lastly, there's the tankering capability that will bring a whole new level of cost savings to your tankering by automatically analyzing the flights in the system and determining the amount that needs to be tankered at each airport. And here, like I promised, on the left, you can see a list of the supported scheduling systems. This isn't actually all of them. And so if you want to see the entire list, you can go to foreflight.com/dispatch-scheduling. And there you can find all of the supported scheduling providers. And as well, like I mentioned before, in terms of the trip support providers, we have Jeppesen ITPS, Honeywell Forge, and UAS. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Caitlin, and she can kick us off with the demo.
Thanks, Sam. We're going to start on the Dispatch tab. So when you have Dispatch activated on your account, you'll see the Dispatch tab at the top left of the navigation bar. The first thing you're going to see here is the flights list. So if you've got a scheduling system connected, you will see flights automatically populating in here, as you can see in this example here. You can also see any flights that you've created, and there's quite a few different views you can choose here. So starting at the top left, you can sort this list by filing status. You can also sort this list by different time frames. So right now we've got plus or minus 1 week, but you can choose all future flights, last 30 days. You can also set a custom time frame. We've also got an option to see the flights by who created them. So right now we've got everything turned on, but if you were looking for something that the pilot created, or you only wanted to see flights that your service provider created for you. You can customize that here. On the right side, we've got watch list and search, and we can use these together or separately. Something that we can do on watch list is kind of create a default view for you. So when you're on your browser and you set something in the watch list, it's going to persist. So it'll stay there even if you sign out, sign back in, it'll remember your choices. So for example, if you only wanted to, keep track of the Falcons, now we're only seeing flights with that aircraft type. If we want to find something even more specific, maybe we could search Caitlin. You can see we got down to just 3 flights, and we could also search Van Nuys, and we're getting down to just 1 result. So really easy to get to the exact flight that you're looking for. And then from here, you can click Edit to go into modify the flight plan, and you can also click More, which is going to give you some quick access options for this flight. So you can quickly file it, delete it, and grab relevant documents. Instead of modifying an existing flight, I'm going to create a flight from scratch, just so we can walk through the entire process. So at the top left, I'm going to click New Flight. And once I get into this view, I've got a lot to see, so I'm going to collapse the sidebar just so we have a little more room. So today we're going to be planning with a Challenger 650. Any aircraft that you have licensed for dispatch is going to show up in this drop-down list, and you'll also be able to see which aircraft are activated for runway analysis and have weight and balance configured. For our departure, we're going to put Teterboro. I went ahead and entered the ICAO code, but if you don't know it, you can put in city name, airport name. We'll help you figure out which airport that you're looking for. Some other items you're going to see in this little preview is METAR or TAF information and the longest runway. Once we've selected the airport, you'll see this info button here. If you open this up, you'll get a quick view of METAR, TAF, and NOTAMs. And then you can also go to the airport page to get even more information. For our destination today, we're going to put Stansted. In the date and time area, you can choose a time of departure, a time of arrival, and you can plan in Zulu or local time. We can also add a call sign. And then we can move down to the alternates. Whenever you're clicking on an airport field, as you can see the alternates here, we're going to suggest nearby alternates. So you'll again be able to see that weather information, runway information, and distance from your destination. So let's choose Luton. And if we need to, we can add a second alternate or a takeoff alternate. Since we're flying into Europe, we will also need to select some alternate routing. So if we show this section, right now we've got direct to alternate here, but if you click auto, we'll automatically suggest routing to your alternate. Or if you know exactly what you want to put, you can choose manual and you can change this yourself. Another option you'll see here is the ability to choose an alternate cruise profile. So depending on what you need, where your alternate is, you can choose that cruise profile as well. Moving down to the fuel section, the first thing we want to choose here is our aircraft profiles. So here in this view, depending on the aircraft, of course, you can choose your climb, cruise, and descent profiles. If we're not exactly sure, we can click on the Cruise Advisor, which will let us compare up to 3 cruise profiles at a time. Basically, what you're going to see is your best time and your best fuel. And of course, like I said, if we wanted to look at a different cruise profile, we could change that too. So here you can make an informed decision about which altitude and which cruise profile makes the most sense. If we need to, we can adjust our taxi fuel, and we can also choose a fuel policy. These are the same fuel policies that you'll see in ForeFlight Mobile. And if you need to set anything, max fuel, set a landing fuel policy, you can do that here. I'm going to go ahead and leave it with minimum fuel required for this trip. Another item we can choose here is our FBO. And you'll see retail and contract prices if you're connected with JetFuelX. If we open up the advanced fuel options, we have just some more selections we can make if we need them. The first option we have here is reserve policy. So you can of course set a manual reserve policy, but you can also plan in minutes. You can choose a part that you're operating under. So quite a few options here. For this flight, I'm going to choose EASA Commercial, and that's going to automatically update my reserve policies and my performance table over here on the right. We also have the option to add a contingency policy. You can see since I chose EASA Commercial that it's automatically put in 5% contingency, but we can change that if we need to. The last option here in this section is wind model. So since we're planning for today, we're going to keep it at forecast, but you do also have the option to plan with historical winds and with fixed winds for scenario planning. Moving down to the crew section, this is really important because who you select as the crew here is who's going to receive this flight plan on their devices. So I'm going to choose myself as PIC, and I will choose Josh as my SIC. If we need to, we can add additional crew, such as another SIC or a cabin attendant. And as we move over to the load section, we can see that our 2 pilots are already being counted. From here, we could go ahead and set up our weight and balance, but what I recommend is that we go to the weight and balance tab so we can get in more detail. So we'll go over here and you can see that myself and Josh are already counted in the crew section here, and we're also being considered as part of the basic operating weight. The way that this aircraft is configured right now is a 10-passenger configuration, and this is something that we've already created and set up on this aircraft profile. So this is something you ideally would want to do beforehand. From here, we can add any people that we want, and of course we can adjust the weights, default weights, all of that is customizable here as well. As I'm making changes on the left, you can see on the right that our envelope is updating as well. As you scroll down, you can of course add any cargo that you need to, and you can see all of the items that are being considered in the basic operating weight as well. So once this looks good, we can, of course, generate a load manifest. That will show up on the devices as well, but we can also just go back to flight planning. So if we go back to the flight tab, you can see now our load is grayed out. So we can't make changes here. If we need to make changes, we'll go into the weight and balance tab. All right. Moving down to the ETP and ETOPS section, if this is something that you need for your operation, you can input your ETP airports here. So for this transatlantic crossing, we've got some standards. So I'll go ahead and put in Gander. Again, if you don't know, like Keflavik, for example, will help you find it. And let's also do Shannon. So that has now plotted our ETP airports, our different scenarios along our route. We can also check the box for PSR, point of safe return, and ETOPS. And then you'll see those ETOPS rings showing up here. All right, now that we've put in our ETP airports, we can get down to the routes section. The first thing you're always going to see between any airport pair is the recommended route. This is ForeFlight's routing engine, and we're going to consider wind, temperature, aircraft performance. In the US, we're going to consider what's most likely to be cleared as filed. We're also going to be checking this against Eurocontrol to make sure, as you can see, that you have a Eurocontrol valid routing. Another little tool here that we have is a turbulence indicator. So if we just hover over it like I'm doing here, we can see where that turbulence is going to be. So just another visual indicator if you're going to encounter some turbulence. Josh, do you want to add anything there?
So I think the turbulence selectors, for me, is very useful. Something else I find useful is like the cruise advisor that Caitlin showed just a little bit earlier. It also shows cruise turbulence at the various flight levels. So that is to say, if you were in the cruise advisor and you could see this route at flight level 350 has moderate turbulence, but at, say, flight level 390 is smooth, then using the cruise advisor, you're able to select the route and that flight level from there. And I find tying those together, both the recommended route with the cruise advisor and the turbulence indications, is a pretty handy way to understand, where you might be able to achieve the smoothest ride as you balance time and fuel burn as well.
Thanks, Josh. This can be a great starting point. This may be all that you need for your routing. But if you did need to get more complex, maybe adding constraints, making more detailed planning, we can go into the route builder. So the route builder is a super powerful piece of dispatch. The first thing that you'll see here is that we can add constraints to our route. So for this type of flight, maybe we might want to go via a certain track. We can choose use any, or since we're going eastbound, we can choose the exact track that we want to use. We can add as many constraints as we want, and when we're ready, we can hit Generate New Route. And what is happening here is we're going against all of those variables that we were already considering, and we're adding in that new constraint, and we're going to generate a new Eurocontrol valid optimized route for you. And now you can see this is going via the NAT track Yankee, and we've got a new route with new points in here, and it is Eurocontrol valid. Another tool that we have in this view is the ability to make adjustments by leg. So if you needed to descend early, or if you need to make a change, you can just click on the plus and add an adjustment. And again, that'll be factored into your route string as well.
One of the ways that I use the route builder in particular is I do a lot of trips between California and Hawaii. And because of the airway structure there, and of course it being non-radar oceanic, I want to plan the flight so that I have enough fuel at the lowest altitude I'll fly with. So in the Challenger, for example, I may specify the maximum altitude to be flight level 370. And although I plan to step climb during the trip, that allows me to say, if I have enough fuel at flight level 370 to do the trip, then I know I can do the trip as I step climb and gain some fuel with the lower fuel burn. So on this screen, what I'll typically do is set max altitude, flight level 370, generate the route with that, and then now I have a flight plan with ETPs, fuel planning, time, etc., based on that lowest cruise altitude that I'm going to be flying.
Thanks, Josh. Now that we're back in the flight view here, one thing, once we've got our route set up exactly the way that we want it, if we want to make sure that this is always showing as an option, we can click Save. And we can rename this, we can leave it exactly as it is, and we can save this route so it'll always show up for any users on the account. And you can see I've already saved a route with this name, so I'm either need to overwrite it or rename it to something else. let's call it Teterboro Nat Y, and we'll save it. And then you'll see, if we scroll down a little bit, we've got recommended routes, and then now we have a new section for saved routes. So at the top here, we've been planning on the flight tab, we've been planning in our weight and balance tab, and now we can take a look at what's been going on in runway analysis. So if you have runway analysis configured for your aircraft, we're going to automatically suggest what we think is the best runway available for all of your different airports. So if we open up this section here, let's just take a look at takeoff, for example. We are going to automatically fill in this first section here, the latest weather. So we are using the latest METAR for Teterboro. If you have more up-to-date information, or maybe let's say once you get onto the iPad as the pilot, you can update with the latest ATIS. This aircraft configuration section, you can also make changes if you need to. You can set default configurations in the aircraft profile as well. And as we scroll down, you can see all of the runways available, and we've got this auto select runway and engine out procedure for best max takeoff weight. So we've got that turned on. So this is the suggestion that the ForeFlight system is making. You can see the other ones here if there's a runway that's closed, or if you are getting a little bit too heavy, we're going to notify you about that. So let's say runway 1 seems good. We can take a look at the engine out procedure that ForeFlight is suggesting as well. So we can click on the map, we can get a visual representation, and we can also see the textual details. We do also have straight out EOPs as well. Josh, do you want to say a little bit about the RNAV procedures?
Yeah, so we design all of our RNAV procedures basically with simplicity in mind. So we, of course, want to maximize the takeoff weight that the engine out procedure is going to allow, but we're also going to make sure that the procedure is flyable and fairly simple to fly. As the crew has their hands full with an engine inoperative, and now they're transitioning over to our EOP. So most of the EOPs that we design are very simple. They're all as simple as they possibly can be while maximizing the takeoff weight allowable off of that runway. And while we're talking about runway selection and EOPs, a question that I receive quite a bit is, what are we looking at when we auto-select runway and EOP for the maximum takeoff weight? If all runways are being equal, we obviously are going to favor a longer runway with the least amount of crosswind and that has a headwind component. So if we have a runway with a headwind component with minimal crosswind and allows a heavy weight, that's going to be the runway that we are going to auto select. And obviously, as those factors, if they can't play into it, we're going to have a 15-knot crosswind. Then we're really looking at runway length as well as the maximum takeoff weight from that runway. So we always prefer to not have a tailwind and a crosswind if possible, but really weight and headwind are the two primary focuses on what we're looking for with the auto selection of the runway.
Thanks for those additional details, Josh. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of folks wonder how we make these suggestions for them and how they can know that it really is the best suggestion for them. Just scrolling down, just to kind of expand, taking a look at the landing section, it's very similar. We've got the weather information configuration. So same kind of function here. We can auto select your best landing runway. And you can, go through these, take a look, and of course, change your runway if you need to or want to. The last thing I want to do here on the runway analysis bit is generate a report. So this report, again, is something that's going to show up on the iPad as well, and we can definitely take a look at it. But this is going to give you a report of all of the possible runways. So you have a lot of information, even if you need to make a last minute change, if the winds change, something like that, you'll know you'll have all of the information that you need for all those different runways. The last thing I want to talk about in the Runway Analysis tab is our report. So if we click Generate Report here, we're going to get a detailed report. And I'm going to hand it off to Josh to kind of talk through this.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. So the Runway Analysis report basically gives us a summary that's suitable for in-cockpit use. Under the takeoff summary, we have some of the parameters that we have inherited from previously setting up in the flight, takeoff weight, the meteorological conditions, as well as the the takeoff options, APR, whether it's a rolling takeoff, those sort of things. We have a summary of what the engine out procedure that we've selected consists of. So it's in text form, tells us what to do for the EOP that we've selected. And then in addition, we have the maximum allowable weights for each runway at our departure airport at the various temperatures. So we're able to see what the maximum weight is, off of runway 01 in Teterboro at each OAT, as well as what's limiting that takeoff weight. So using 01 as an example here, we can see that basically we have no limits at all. So if it's 10 degrees out, we can take our maximum takeoff weight due to the structure and depart Teterboro and be in compliance with that EOP that we've selected. And in addition, just like at the top of the page where we had takeoff parameters, we have our landing parameters. And then in this table that we're looking at right here, we get to see with the current conditions that we have predicted for landing, or the conditions that we've predicted for landing, we're able to see from the runway that we've selected, in this case runway 22, with the planned winds, 0 winds, and a 10-knot tailwind. So basically a best case scenario of the planned winds or 0 winds, or a worst case scenario of a 10-knot tailwind, we're able to see how much runway is required and how much runway do we need once it's been factored. In addition to that, to the right, similar to how we do it for takeoff, we show what's limiting the max landing weight. Is it a limit on stopping? Is it a limit on runway length, or is it simply the structural max landing weight? So this is a great overall summary for quick reference to see what the airplane is capable of doing in takeoff or landing for our selected airports.
Thanks, Josh. All right, so to the right of Runway Analysis, we've got the ATC Data tab. So in here, we're going to make any filing relevant updates. For example, we can add some remarks. We can take a look at our other information, add in some details there if we need to. And at the bottom here, you can see the flight plan exactly as it's going to be delivered to ATC. In the middle here, we've got Flight Watchers. So this is a dispatch-specific tool, and we can set a default watcher. Basically, this is someone who is not crew for this flight, but they want to be apprised of everything that's going on with this flight. They want to get the emails, the updates, the changes. So you can add either someone who is in your account, or you can just punch in any email address here, and they'll get all of the email notifications about the flight. Another really great tool for our planners here is Dispatcher Notes. So this is going to be showing on the NavLog, and you've got 5,000 characters here. So a lot of our customers are generally going to say something like, hey, tanker 3,000 pounds at Van Nuys. Really anything that you want to say to your crew and you want them to know about kind of right front and center, you can put that here. These dispatcher notes are also going to show up on the initial release email. So as soon as they get notified about this flight, they get that release email, they're going to see those dispatcher notes here, there as well. The last thing here, we're going to automatically fill in your AFTN addresses, but if you have a custom AFTN address, you can add those in here as well. Once we hit the Save button, we're going to see the option to file this flight plan. Now, because we are filing with Eurocontrol and this is live, I'm not actually going to hit that file button, but once we would hit that file button, we would start getting our acknowledgement, our other information back here in the filing messages section. Moving over from ATC Data, we've got the Files tab. So we, of course, have some documents that we generate automatically in Dispatch. Your NavLog or operational flight plan, briefing, ICAO flight plan form, some other documents as well, which we'll get to. But if you have some custom documents that you need to upload, you can do that here. You'll see that I've already got a document in here. I've set a rule for my business. We like to call them an operational rule, where every time I'm planning with this aircraft type, this file is automatically uploaded. So I didn't even have to come in here and manually upload this. It's just already here. But of course, we could hop in here and grab anything else that we might need to and add it as well. And then once you do that, you've got the timestamp here so you can see exactly when it was created, when it was put in here, and when it was updated. And we support lots of different file types, so you shouldn't have any issues there. All right, so the last tab here is eAPIS. We currently support eAPIS for the US, Mexico, and CARICOM in the Caribbean. For this flight, however, you can still submit eAPIS for your outbound flight from the United States. So we'll just kind of quickly walk through. Of course, if you want to learn more about eAPIS, you can contact us. So the first thing I'll choose here is whether I'm planning a private or a commercial flight. We'll go ahead and go with private for this one. Private and commercial are fairly similar in terms of filing eAPIS. The first thing we're going to choose is an aircraft operator, and I've already got some in here, but of course we can modify those or add a new contact if we need to. If you have a CBP decal number, you can input that here. Any additional foreign landing airports, you can put those as well. As we get down to the crew section, you can see I've got a check mark and Josh has a red exclamation mark. So we can see if something's missing from the details, we can update that here. So let's take a look. And we can see that some of the required items are not filled out. So of course we can update those as well. And in the passenger section, when we were going through weight and balance, we did add a couple of folks onto the aircraft and they're not here in the manifest. So we definitely need to make sure that we add our passengers.
Yeah, and as Caitlin adds these passengers, once you've entered the data one time, everything that can be restored from the previous submission will be restored. So she's only having to enter this information because this is the first time that these passengers have been used on an eAPIS filing.
Now that I've got all of the information correct for my crew and my passengers, I can review and submit. And at the bottom here, you'll see for Stansted, eAPIS is not supported, but for our outbound flight from Teterboro, it is supported. So we can hit review and submit, and it's going to load our eAPIS manifest. And Josh, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So the eAPIS manifest is essentially, a one-page document, assuming you don't have too many passengers, that lists all the pertinent information: the departure point, the arrival point, departure and arrival times, the aircraft you're using, aircraft operator, owner, crew information, passenger information. So at a glance, you're going to get the information that's being submitted to CBP through the eAPIS. So you get their passport number, expiration, all the things that you as a dispatcher or a pilot may want at a quick glance is right here. Once we've submitted the eAPIS manifest, which we won't do in this case, but once we've submitted it, this manifest then is automatically attached to the file section of the flight. So it's accessible in ForeFlight dispatch under files, as well as to the crew when they open the flight in ForeFlight Mobile in the file section of the flight. This exact manifest will be visible in all those places.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And once you're ready and you hit submit, that will go straight to the authorities. So just be aware that when you hit submit, you are submitting that eAPIS. We won't hit submit today.
Yeah, and I think, Caitlin, I'd like to add as well, once you have submitted the eAPIS manifest, you will receive the normal emails that you might be accustomed to receiving through CBP. So you'll get the initial email that says, you've submitted eAPIS, here's the eAPIS confirmation number, and you're cleared for the flight. So we track that information within dispatch. It'll say that the eAPIS manifest has been filed, and in addition, you'll get the email that says the same information.
Yeah, definitely. And another item that we won't really get into today, but if you do need to file commercial eAPIS, you just need to reach out to our customer success team because they're going to register you with CBP. So if you have questions about that, please reach out to our success team and we'll give you that information at the end. All right, so now we've gone through the tabs on the left here. If we look at the right side of the page, we've got our performance summary. As you can see, we've got, with our weight information and fuel information, we've got some checks here. You can see weight and balance. We're within our limits, within our envelope. And we don't have any for this flight, but if, for example, a runway was closed, there was any sort of NOTAM, anything like that, you would see some flight advisories here. So just some things that we think you should be aware of. Those will show up here. At the top right of the page, we've got the NavLog and the briefing and the more button. So the NavLog is actually included in the briefing packet, but we do have the ability for you to choose different NavLog layouts. So you can see we've got quite a few on this account. You can build your own, any kind of customized NavLog, and you can choose a different NavLog per flight if you want to. So I'll go ahead and stick with our default NavLog, and I'll click on the briefing to generate that. While that's loading, just to show you the more dropdown, this is where you can grab your ICAO flight plan form and some other relevant documents. We'll load the overflight report as well. Okay, so here is our briefing packet. So as you can see, our NavLog is the first thing in the packet. Josh, do you want to walk through the NavLog a little bit?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Caitlin. So, the NavLog that we're seeing here, like Caitlin mentioned, is slightly customized, but essentially the template that we're seeing is fairly similar to our international NavLog that we offer by default. So at the top of the NavLog, we have the city pair and the profile that we're going to be using. So in this case, Teterboro to London at 300 knots to Mach 0.80 and the altitude. On the right-hand side, we get to see when the NavLog was created and what wind forecast it was using when it was created, a quick summary bar saying how long it's going to take, the wind components, those sort of things. We get our route RAIM check, and below that, we get a view of our fuel table that shows us what we've set for taxi fuel, what the destination fuel is, contingency, those sort of things, followed by the takeoff weight, landing weight. The recall number, if there is one, will be on the right-hand side under the info section. And then we have an RVSM or altimeter check that we use below that to do your hourly checks. Of course, you can write down your departure ATIS, your clearance, and then we move into the NavLog table. And again, there's some customization that's available here. In this case, this is a pretty standard one. Simply shows the waypoints, altitudes, winds, temperatures, true airspeed, fuel, that sort of things. And it's suitable for writing notes as you go, as you're flying, for use as somewhat of a master document. Below that, we have the section that covers our alternate flight planning, some arrival information, winds and cruise, winds and cruise time and route. Below that, the various altitudes, and our ETP summary and ETP tables that basically are showing for each ETP how much fuel are we going to be using, the time to ETP, and how much fuel are we landing with at those ETP airports.
Yeah, there's a ton of information on the NavLog here, and as Josh mentioned, they are customizable, so you can make this look exactly the way that you want. Another item that you can customize within your briefing packet is if you want to include the ICAO flight plan form, so you can see we've got that here. And then we get into the briefing. So the first image that we're seeing here is our vertical cross-section chart. So this is going to show you the side view of your flight. We're going to show you icing, turbulence, wind information, a lot of info here. And then as we scroll down, we've got the top-down view of a lot of that same information, winds, temps, and turbulence. I've got this customized to where I can see multiple altitudes for these wind charts. So you can see I've got flight level 350. Now I've got 390. So just more information for you to look at. Another thing, since we specified ETP airports, we've also got an ETP wind chart. And as we go down the briefing, a lot of information I'm sure that our folks are used to seeing, right? We've got a significant weather charts. We've also got our overflight report, which I did load up in another tab, but we've got it right here included in our briefing packet. And what we're going to give you here in the overflight report is estimated costs associated with this flight. So we're going to let you know where and when and for how long you're going to be overflying, for example, over Canada, into the UK, and what's the cost associated with overflying those areas.
Yeah, I think the overflight report's especially great for planning overflight permits. At least it gives you a quick overview of what are you going to fly over, and are there some permit considerations that as an operator you might need to be thinking of for each country that you're going to be over.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, as we get down here, METARs, TAFs, SIGMETs, AirMets, we're going to have all of our NOTAMs. All of that information is going to be here as well. All right. So at the bottom right, we've already hit save a couple of times, but we have made some changes, so we're going to hit save again. And if we haven't filed by this point, we can go ahead and file a flight plan. We're just going to imagine that we're doing that during this flight. And then we can release the flight. So that crew that we set at the beginning, we hit this release button. Once we click that release button, we will have the option to release the flight as a read-only flight or release it as editable. So kind of depending on your operation, if you want your pilots to be able to make changes on the iPad, or if you don't, you can set a default setting, or you can make it available where your dispatcher can choose which format it's going to release as. If you hadn't added your dispatcher notes yet, you could definitely add them here. And then we'll click Release Flight. And on the bottom left here, you can see the release status. Once it's released, we will get a timestamp here. You can see it's thinking now. We've got our filing status. And the last thing I want to show you here is this last change. So if we click View History, we can see everything that's happened to this flight. So we've got a great little audit trail here if we need to see who changed something, who released the flight, what happened. Of course, this has all been me, but if we needed to get into these details, you can see, modified here. Click Details. You can see I changed the route. I changed the time of departure. I changed the reserve fuel. So you've got a lot of insight into what's happened, who's touched the flight, whether that be your planners, your pilots, your service provider in that view. And there's our timestamp. You can see we've just released this. And now that we've done that, I'm going to switch over to the iPad and show you what that looks like there. All right, so I'm in ForeFlight Mobile now, and I'm on the Flights tab. And you can see this flight has already shown up on my iPad. I've also got an email and everything like that, but I've got it right here in my ForeFlight app. So on the left, you can see that there's a little tag at the bottom of the route string and it says HD Aviation. So that's showing me, that my company shared this with me. It's a company flight. If I tap on it, I can take a look and I can see all of the information that was planned. We've got our NavLog, our briefing, and we've also got one new file. So if I tap here, I can see the file that was already added when we were planning in dispatch, and I can open it up as well. If something new gets added, I will be notified by a new red dot so that, if there's a new file that the planner adds for me, I can grab that and see it. The sync between dispatch and mobile is really quick. Again, everything we planned is here. We can take a look at everything. And when we're ready to fly this, we can hit the Send To button and send this over to the map. And now we've got it right here. We're ready to fly. All right, so let's switch back to dispatch. What I'm gonna do, just to kind of keep it easy, is I'm gonna go back to the flight tab just so we make sure we're on the right flight. This is the one we were just planning. And instead of starting from scratch again, I'm just gonna hit next flight up here at the top center. And that's going to set Stansted as my departure airport. So same people, same crew, everything that we planned basically carries over. I'm just going to change my destination. So let's go to Dubai. We've got Dubai in here, and you can see we've got one notification here. So we can see that this, we're being notified that this runway is closed. And we can also see that in the flight advisories here. And we can view the NOTAM as well. We're going to kind of keep everything the same. We can, of course, change anything if we need to. But we'll go ahead and choose our recommended route. So we can see we've got a Eurocontrol valid route. For a flight, especially like this, I want to go into the route builder and show you some other tools. So let's go into the route builder. The one I want to use for this flight is avoid fur. And we're going to show you exactly the furs that you're overflying. So we can scroll down and let's say we want to avoid the Tehran fur. So we'll just set that for now. We'll hit generate new route. And you can see on the right here on the map, we've got this fur grayed out. So you can see exactly what you're avoiding. Some other constraints that we offer are the ability to avoid a country, insert a partial route, and we'll generate an optimized route around it. You can also avoid airways, go via airways. Same thing with SIDS and stars. So there's a lot of options, a lot of constraints that you can set. A really cool one that we offer now is avoiding a custom area. So if you have a specific, like a small piece along your route that you need to avoid, you can draw a custom shape on the map now as well. So you can see now we've got a new route suggestion, and we can also see that it's Eurocontrol valid. All right, a couple more things I want to show you here in the route builder are in this route tools dropdown. The first thing is the route report. We've heard from our planners that checking the Jeppesen Airway Manual for airway restrictions can take a lot of time. So we do that for you automatically here. You can see the airways that you're overflying, if there's any restrictions, and if they're relevant to you, you can just check the box for avoid. And you can also generate a PDF so you can have a little report of this. So that will be added as another constraint, and again, we'll generate a route around it. Another item I want to show you here is airspace crossings. So this is going to give you a table of all of the FIRs that you're overflying. So that's what we're looking at right now. And you can see all of the FIRs that we're overflying. And then if we click on countries, it's going to switch to countries. So you can see, and as you kind of hover over each waypoint, you can see it highlighted, enlarged on the map. You also have the ability to export this into a CSV or an Excel. Let's go back, and we'll go back one more time. We'll hit save. Of course, we can go through all of the other flight planning that we might need to do, weight and balance, runway analysis, filing the flight plan, all of that. But once we've got this saved and we've done all the planning, again, we can release this flight. And that's going to show up just like we saw before. It's going to show up directly onto the crew devices, and they're going to be notified via email that they're assigned to that flight. Before we wrap up, I just want to quickly talk about settings. So a lot of the planning that we did today was manual. You saw me typing in airports and alternates and fuel policies and stuff like that. But we do have a lot of settings, and we don't have time to get into them today, but there are quite a few things that you can customize. I know we talked about the NavLog, so we've got the NavLog builder here. And we've also got custom airports, operational rules. And this is a really powerful one that we see a lot of our customers using. You can set any kind of rule, set a default alternate, a default fuel policy, default remarks. So there is so much power with what you can do here. You can automate a lot of this, and that is really helpful to save time for your organization. And so with that, we're going to move to our Q&A section. So I'll hand it back to you, Sam.
Thanks, Caitlin. Before we move on to Q&A, I just want to cover a few links here and places where you can go to follow up on this webinar and learn more about Dispatch and even get started with your own demo and free trial. Learn more about ForeFlight Dispatch at foreflight.com/dispatch. It's a very sensible URL. You can sign up to get started at foreflight.com/dispatch-form. Here you can just enter some basic information about your flight department, your operation, how many pilots and flight planners you have, and our sales team will then receive that form and they'll reach out to you to get started with a demo and a free trial. You can register for more of our webinars and watch any of our past ones at foreflight.com/webinars. And you can contact ForeFlight Sales directly by emailing sales@foreflight.com. So with that, we will move on to some questions. All right, so we've got a good number of questions here. Josh did have to step away after the end of the presentation, but we will have Caitlin here to answer these questions. So starting off with question number 1, does Dispatch offer a tankering solution?
Yes, we do. So we actually did we just came out with this feature in the last couple of months, and we have a separate dedicated webinar for this. So just like you see on the screen here, if you want to go to that foreflight.com/webinars page, you can learn more about Fuel Advisor, and you can also contact sales if you want to try it out.
All right, next up. Is it possible to add a flight watcher as a default, or is the user only able to add them on a per flight basis?
So there's a couple different ways that you can set your flight watchers. Per flight, you're going to be doing that on the ATC Data tab. But if you go into the dispatch settings, which is accessible to administrators, once you go in there, you'll be able to kind of set a default organization email, and you'll also be able to set operational rules. So if you want certain watchers on certain aircraft types or certain destinations, you can customize all of that in settings.
All right. I see a new column called tags on the flights list. Can you tell us about that?
on the flights list, so kind of on your homepage of dispatch, there's a new column called tags. Within that, we added a field for a trip ID. And for really any other labels, it's a free text field, so you can set up trip IDs for however it makes sense for your operation. You can also add really any tags you want, and those tags and trip IDs are then searchable. So it'll be easy for you to search for flights that only have a specific tag on them. And all of those tags will be displayed on the NavLog.
All right, next question concerning runway analysis. Where's the runway analysis derived from? Is it APG or flight manual data from the aircraft manufacturer?
Yeah, so we have worked directly with our OEM partners to source this data. So we've got that directly from the flight manuals into our system.
All right, next up, if a pilot has a very short notice tasking for an international trip to EGSS, can he or she call your dispatch group to create and file the flight plan?
So I think that's something that definitely we want to make sure is clear here, is that ForeFlight dispatch does not include trip support, but we do have some really great partners. Jeppesen ITPS and UAS are also Honeywell Forge. So we've got a couple of partners that you can set up with, and you can get trip support through them. And we talked about it kind of at the beginning, but they can actually go into your account and do flight planning on your behalf. Of course, you can set that up however you like, but it is possible for them to go in and do trip support for you and have all of that just right within your dispatch account. If you are interested in getting set up with trip support, you can reach out to our sales team and they can get you more information.
All right, next question. How do you customize the NavLog?
So this is another thing we're going to see in dispatch settings. So you've got to be an administrator on the account. And if you're not an admin, that is something that another admin on your account can turn that on for you. So once you go into settings, you'll see a tab called NavLog Builder. And what we usually recommend is we've got our standard NavLog in there already. Just make a copy of that and use it as a template, and then modify from there. And there's a lot of different blocks and items that you can add in that aren't on the standard option.
All right, and last question here. I am unable to find guidance on how to customize the NavLog on the Support Center page. So is there a dispatch guide that details all of this?
There is. If you go to foreflight.com/support, that's our main support page. If you type in the word dispatch, or if you click into the guides section, we have a dedicated dispatch guide. And that is going to give you just the details on everything dispatch. So if you haven't found it in the main support page, go to that dispatch guide. You can search for keywords in there, and everything that we covered today is included in that guide.
Awesome. One more pair of questions that just came in actually related to that tag feature, asking how we use the tag feature. Correct me if I'm wrong, Caitlin, but I believe you just have to go into a particular flight, and along the very bottom of the screen where it has the flight information, you can click a button to add tags and a trip ID.
Yeah, and actually, Sam, if we can show my screen, I believe I'm sharing. So I'm in a flight right now, just a sample flight. At the bottom here, center, you see a new tag section. So you can click edit within a flight. You can see I've already got a tag in here. And I could, let's say, put in a trip ID. I can also put in another tag if I want to, just hit update. But I want to point out, you don't actually have to go into a flight. You can do it directly from the flights list. So if I go to flights, I can just go to the More tab and click Edit Tags and do it right from here. So you don't even have to go into the flight if you just kind of want to do it really quickly, you can update things there.
Perfect. And then I think, can't you also click on the tags to like add those to your search?
Yeah, you sure can. So if we click on multi-leg trip, you can see it gets added to my watch list, and this is automatically filtered, only showing me these flights with this tag. So yeah, really easy to search for something again, and you could just punch that in if it's not here in your results. So yeah, lots of different ways to filter and find those tags, and you could also search for something, you know, another tag. Let's say I put in this trip ID, and now I'm filtered down to one flight.
Perfect. Thanks for that explanation. The last question here is, what is the pricing structure for dispatch? That is something that we don't put out there on our public pages, but you can email sales@foreflight.com and to start the conversation about getting started with ForeFlight Dispatch. And from there, you'll be informed what the pricing structure is. So with that said, I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks so much, everyone, for attending. Thanks, Caitlin and Josh, for a great presentation. As we've been saying, you can go to foreflight.com/dispatch to learn all about dispatch. Sign up at foreflight.com/dispatch form, or you can just email sales@foreflight.com. Like I just said, our sales team will be very happy to set you up with a demo and even a free trial of dispatch, so you can kick the tires before fully committing to it. And lastly, this webinar and all of our other webinars will be accessible at foreflight.com/webinars starting tomorrow. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you on the next webinar.